Hello students, in this video we're going to be going over how we use the Inequalz app on your calculator. This is an app for the TI-84 graphing calculator. The way you access this app is you press the Apps button and you scroll down to letter I, or you press alpha and then X squared, because that's where I is in green. You select the Inequalz app, and to get it started you just press any key. Now, depending on which type of calculator you have, your screen will look like one of these two. On the newer versions of the graphing calculator, when you press the Y equals button, you will see that there's an option now that says Quit App, which means the Inequalz app is now running. On the older version of the calculator, when you move the cursor over the equal to sign, you will see the 5 options for graphing inequalities pop up along the bottom. Now here's what we want to do with this app. We first want to go about graphing y is greater than or equal to 3. So here's how we do that. You're basically just going to type in, like you would graph an equation, y equals 3. Now on the newer versions of the calculator, what you need to do to access the inequality symbol is you need to move the cursor way over to the left-hand side so that the entire left side is boxed off. Now what you're going to do is you're going to press enter. And when you do that, your calculator gives you the option of choosing the color that you want to use for the inequality. And here, the second line down allows you to access the inequality symbols. Right now, it's on equals. But if you move the cursor to the equals position, you'll see now this option pop up, which will allow you to, pressing to the left or to the right, change your inequality symbols. So here what we want to do is we want to graph y is greater than or equal to 3. So what we're going to simply do is move the cursor to where you see y is greater than or equal to. Once you select your inequality symbol, move the cursor down to OK, and then press enter. And now you're ready to go. On the older version of the calculator, the key to accessing the inequality symbols is pressing the alpha button. Since I want to graph greater than or equal to, I will press the alpha button and then press the graph, because that's the graphing button that's underneath the inequality symbol that I want. So on the older version of the calculator, the key is you press alpha and then any of these 5 buttons pertaining to the inequality symbols. So here I'm going to select greater than or equal to. So now both calculators are ready to go, and I'm going to graph this in the standard viewing window to start. So here I'm just going to press the zoom button and then option 6. When you do that, here's what your calculator should look like. Both calculators are giving you a solid line, and you're shading above 3 on the y-axis. Now what you're going to have to do is this. You're going to have to name a point that's in the solution area and verify it algebraically. So what you're going to need to do is select any point that's in the solution area. The solution area is the area that's shaded in. So any point that's above this line, y is equal to 3, will do. So here, for example, maybe I'll choose the point 0, 6. I'm going to plug that point into my inequality and verify that it works algebraically. For the point 0, 6, its x value is 0, its y value is 6. So here this particular inequality is saying y, which I chose as 6, is greater than or equal to 3. And of course 6 is greater than or equal to 3, so that checks. What I now want to do is I want to graph 2 inequalities at the same time and try to find the solution area to the 2 inequalities. So here are the 2 inequalities I would like you to try to graph is y is less than or equal to -2 and y is greater than 2x plus 2. Take a moment, enter those two inequalities into your graphing calculator, and let's try to graph them at the same time. So what we want to do is we want to graph both of these inequalities in the same viewing window, and we'll go with the standard view and try to find where the shadings of each inequality meet up. Remember, on the newer version of the calculator, you have to move the cursor way over to the left to change the inequality symbol. On the older version of the calculator, just simply highlight the equal to and press alpha, and then whichever button underneath the graphing screen corresponds to the inequality symbol that you want. So here, when we graph these two in the standard viewing window, here's what your calculator should look like. We're looking for where both inequalities overlap, and it might be a little bit easier to see on the newer version of the calculator in that the double shaded area appears to be in this bottom left-hand corner. But not to worry, your calculator can find this solution area for you. On the older version of the calculator, you notice these options pop up along the bottom. What you want to do is you want to select the Shades menu, which is above both the Y equals button and the window button on the older version of the calculator. So if you're using the older version of the calculator, simply press alpha and then either Shades or Y equals or window. So alpha, Y equals, or alpha window, and this is what your calculator should look like. On the newer version of the calculator, the way you access that same menu is you have to go to the Calculate menu, which is above the trace. So if you press, for the newer version of the calculator, the alpha, what you're going to do is you're going to get to the Calculate menu, which is above the trace in blue. So you're going to press second and then trace to get to Calculate, and here's what your calculator should look like. You see basically it matches the older version of the calculator. I see the inequality intersection, I see union, I see original shades. The older version of the calculator has this POI option, trace, which is located with number 1 for the newer version of the calculator. So basically both calculators do the same thing. What we want to do is we want to highlight, we want to select the inequality intersection. That's going to give me the solution area. That's going to give me the area on the graph where both shadings match up. So on the newer version of the calculator, simply select option 2. For the older versions of the calculator, you want to select option 1 for inequality intersection. And what happens is your calculator is now going to regraph each inequality and then only shade at the end the solution area. Notice now both calculators have the solution area shaded in. Now you do have to be a little bit patient with this app because it's not a very quick graphing app. So when you graph, it actually takes its time methodically graphing each inequality and then only ultimately showing the solution area. And we're going to have to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to have to choose a point from the solution area and verify that point algebraically. So any point that's in that solution area. So I'm going to choose the point -5, if I go 5 to the left on the x-axis, and then -5. I'm going to choose this point over here, which I believe is in the solution area. Now, you never want to choose a point that's so close to the solution area that it may be actually on the outside. So I'm going to choose -5, -5, and now I'm going to verify that that point checks both inequalities. So for my point -5, -5, both the x and the y are -5. So I'm going to write out each inequality and now plug in and verify. Here I have y, which is -5, Negative 5 is less than or equal to negative 2. And if you think about where those numbers are on a number line, negative 5 is to the left of negative 2, so that's true. And then here I have y, which is again negative 5. That equals, or is greater than, so I'm checking an inequality, greater than 2 times x, 2 times negative 5 plus 2. So I have negative 5 is greater than negative 10 plus 2, which is negative 8. And if I think about where those numbers lie on a number line, remember the negative numbers kind of work opposite. Here, negative 5 is greater than, it's more to the right, than negative 8. So my point, negative 5 comma negative 5, verifies both inequalities. For our last problem, now I want to graph 3 inequalities and graph them all in the same standard viewing window and find a point in the solution area. And for this first inequality, 3x plus 2y is less than 6. In order to graph inequalities, just like we had to graph equations, you have to isolate the y. You have to get the y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides. So here I'm going to have 2y is less than 6 minus 3x. And then here I'm going to divide both sides by 2 to get y is less than 6 minus 3x over 2. Just be careful when you deal with inequalities. Anytime you divide by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality sign. Here we're dividing by a positive 2, so the inequality sign is going to stay as less than, not greater than. So that's how I'm going to graph the first inequality. The second inequality, y is bigger than or equal to 0. We can graph that as is. Type those two into your calculator, and then I'll show you how we're going to graph x's greater than negative 4. Couple of things to note as you type these in. For the newer versions of the calculator, the alpha y equals fraction template works just fine. So I simply just type in my fraction, 6 minus 3x over 2. On the older version of the calculator, the alpha y equals template, where it gives you a box over a box where you can type in your fraction, it doesn't work. So the way you're going to have to type in fractions, and we're going to do this quite often, is you're going to have to enclose both terms in parentheses for our numerator. So here I'm graphing y is less than parentheses, 6 minus 3x, close parentheses, divided by 2. So one little issue with the older version of the calculator, you have to enclose the numerator in parentheses. Now what's different here is that I have to graph the inequality x is greater than negative 4. But if you notice in the upper left-hand corner of this app, you see an x equals option. You can graph inequalities that are in the form x, your inequality symbol, in this case greater than, and then a number. So you can graph x is greater than negative 4 by moving the cursor in this upper left-hand corner and selecting x equals. So I selected the x equals in the upper corner, and now you notice I have a screen where I can graph up to 6 different x inequalities or equations. You can only graph x and then a number. You can't graph x is greater than 2y minus 6. If you have an x and a y in your inequality, like we did for the first one, you have to use the y equals screen. But here, to graph x is greater than negative 4, all I'm going to do is just type in negative 4 and adjust the inequality symbols the same way as I did before. So now I'm ready to go with all 3 inequalities. Move the cursor back to the y equals graphing screen. When I move the cursor back in that upper left-hand corner and pressed enter, you'll notice now the x equals box is shaded in. That's telling you that you have an inequality being graphed in the form x equals. When you go about doing future problems, you have to remember that it's there. So if you ever see this cursor in the upper left-hand corner, this x equals icon highlighted, that means you have an inequality or an equation typed in, and you can't forget that it's there, because if you don't need it, you need to go and deselect it and just clear it out. So here what I'm going to now do is I'm going to graph both of these things in the standard viewing window by going zoom 6, and you're going to see that you're going to be patient as your calculator goes about methodically graphing all three inequalities. The more inequalities that you have to graph, the more involved the shading is going to look on your calculator. So here it might be tough to see where the true solution area is. It's where all the shadings match up. So here what I'm going to do is on the newer version of the calculator now, I'm going to go to second and trace for calculate. Going to move the cursor over to inequality and then select option 2 for inequality intersection. On the older version of the calculator, I'm going to select alpha and then either y equals or window to get to the shades menu, and select option 1 for inequality intersection. And here is what the final solution area looks like. Triangle. Now I'm going to choose a point that's in the solution area and verify that it works for all three inequalities. And the point I'm going to use is the point just above the origin, the point 0, 1. You should always, if you have the option, choose a point that has a 0 as one of its coordinates, because zeros make algebra simple. So now I'm going to plug in the point 0, 1 into all three inequalities and verify that it checks. So I'll take the first inequality, 3x plus 2y is less than 6. Here my x value is going to be 0. Here my y value is going to be 1. So I have 3 times x, 3 times 0, plus 2 times y, 2 times 1. Well, 3 times 0 just disappears. That's why I chose a point with a 0. 2 times 1 is just 2, and 2 is less than 6. Here my second inequality, y is greater than or equal to 0. Here my y value is 1. So here I'm going to have 1 is greater than or equal to 0, and that's true. And then my last inequality, x is greater than negative 4. Here my x value is 0, and 0 is greater than negative 4. If you think about a number line, you have 0 is to the right of negative 4, so that one does check as well. So that's how we're going to graph inequalities using the Inequalz app.